One word to describe this journey.
Enriching.
The re-entry journey. What would be one word to describe this journey?
Enriching.
Unapologeticness.
Elevating.
Resilience.
I say transformation.
Intentional.
Blessing.
Rebirth.
The re-entry journey. The re-entry journey. The re-entry journey. The re-entry journey. All right, man. We are back. It's Monday night. Y'all know what time it is. Another episode of the Re-Entry Journey. I am your host, Cordell Sims, and tonight we have the guest. His story, his journey. Oh, I've been doing some research, and woo, we're talking about a journey. We're talking about a transformation, all in one walk. Inside, starting on the inside. Starting within, this is the journey to listen to. This is the journey to learn from. Tonight, I bring to the floor our guest, Mr. Adam Grant. Welcome to the Reentry Journey.
Thanks for having me, man.
So, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name's Adam Grant. I guess the biggest part of my reentry journey is like you said, I did it all in a chunk. I did an A and a B prefix, but I've been out for like 19 months after serving 27 straight years on a bank robbery. So that's a chunk. I don't even know if you can call that a bid anymore.
Nah, I don't. What else? Yeah, you know, it changed it up. Now you just don't know what a bid is nowadays. Right. So tell us a little. I did some research, and we want to talk a little bit about your childhood and growing up. And I recall you said about 12 years old is when you did about your first robbery.
Yeah. Zephyr gas station. Taking my sisters to the babysitter of all things. At that point in time, I mean, I didn't really understand the consequences, any of that stuff. I didn't think I was going to amount to anything anyway. It's 1982. It was like the first video arcade in town. Of course, we're broke. We're on welfare. I ain't got no quarters to be pumping into those things. And saw an opportunity and took it. Didn't think of the big picture.
So, explain your childhood growing up, pre-high school. What was it like?
I mean, starting at the beginning, my mother was 15 when she had me. That couldn't have been easy for her. We've recently reconnected, and it was more, she was trying to be a mother, but it was a little bit more of a big sister, little brother situation. So that made for some difficult circumstances. I had another sister at the age of 5, then at 6, she had another sister. So I grew up, kind of, considerably older than the others. My mom got divorced at 8 for the second time. So I kind of became the man of the house. As a matter of fact, I just had a realization about that. I did another podcast and realized I hadn't mentioned my brother. My brother, I've got a brother that we've got the same dad, but I didn't meet him until I was like 10 years old. And I realized that in my mind, my childhood was only up until the age of 8. So when I describe things of being, my childhood, it kind of stops at 8 years old. So I got to give my brother Nate Shelton a shout out because he knows I love him, and I appreciate him, and I missed him on the last one. So,
all right, yeah, hey Nate, we're gonna give you a shout out.
Right,
make sure you get that shout out for you, Nate Shelton. We appreciate it.
But more past after that. I mean, it was just I don't know how to describe it other than the fact that a lot of people told me I had a lot of potential, which never sat very well for me because I always heard it when I wasn't living up to it, So it was a really difficult thing for me to, I didn't want to. So I kept shooting it down. So, 12 years old doing that, 15 years old breaking into the school, It was just a constant thing, constantly running away, constantly running in the wrong circles. It was easier to be impressive at being reckless and not very thoughtful than it was to be impressive, in the traditional ways. It was pretty easy for me to do outlandish stuff. So
Right. And I think I listened to that interview, and I recall you saying in that interview that because you're talking about impressive, you said it's not impressing anyone but to become impressive. So back then, were you more into impressing everyone?
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. I had no clue what being impressive was. And I also didn't believe that I actually had what it took to be impressive. So I would always, do things to the extreme. I would drink the most. I would do the most drugs. I've described it sometimes as, if you remember the movie The Town, when Ben Affleck comes up to a boy and he says, some people are going to get hurt. You don't ask any questions. No boy's like, who's driving?
Yeah.
That was kind of me. People knew it because people knew that I'd go on a mission with them and I wouldn't ask questions because it wasn't so much that I wanted to fit in, but I did want to be a part of something and I wanted to be known as the best at something. So I guess in some ways, I kind of set about being the best at being the worst in some ways, which never quite set right either because,
Right.
I was hard and a softy all at the same time. I always had a conscience after the fact. I just didn't think about it before.
Before the fact, but after the fact, you started to think about it.
Always.
So it's before we get off and really deep into the story, explain Hyoka.
Hyoka is a Lakota term for, and it's basically interpreted into clown, but it's not actually a clown. The Lakota people had Hyokas in their tribes and in their bands that lived everything backwards. I mean, they would wash with dirt. They would eat things that you shouldn't eat. They would ride their horse through the village backwards, depending on who it was. They would do a lot of things that were just completely backwards, and they served a purpose. In the village. The purpose was that if he's doing that, then I shouldn't be because he's a Hyoka. He's doing everything you're not supposed to do. And so in some strange, twisted way, as I learned more about this later, that was kind of the perspective that I had about myself is I never truly believed that I could do the right thing. But I thought that somehow in some weird way, I served a purpose by doing the wrong thing to show what not to do. And I was pretty good at it for a while. About anything that Adam was doing, most people probably should not be doing. So,
Right. So let's talk about, in your teenage years, high school. What was that like?
I guess you could say I was a bit of a chameleon, and it depended on which part of the year you were talking about. Because, like, if you started the beginning of the year, I was getting good grades, doing a 2-a-days for football, and doing all the things that you would want somebody to do. And then something would happen. Really, something simple would happen, and it would throw me off the tracks. I'd get into a fight or something and get suspended. And instead of just coming back in 2 days, I'd throw up my hands and be like, I'm done. I'm not doing any of this stuff anymore. And I didn't participate in the football practices anymore. I didn't apply myself to my grades because I always believed that the bad behavior was me and that the good that I was fronting when I was doing the good behavior. And that's one of the things that kind of stuck with me later in life as I started to realize that it was the opposite. And I put the energy into the things that mattered and realized how much I'd been hiding from myself and how much I'd fooled myself. But that was kind of me in a nutshell. And I fit into every group. When I say a chameleon, I was part jock, part burnout, I could hang out with pretty much any group that I wanted to. And my clothes kind of told my story too, because you could never tell what I was going to wear from one day to the next. I wasn't typical burnout. I wasn't anything. I'd come dressed to the nines one day, and the next day with the shredded up pants and the concert t-shirt, and the next day was a game day, and I'd have my football jersey on, and the next day I'd have my tortoiseshell Adidas on and the black Levi's, and you just couldn't tell from one day to the next. And that was kind of who I was, constantly morphing, so people couldn't figure it out, probably because I couldn't figure it out.
And so all that energy that you was putting into the school work and sports, when you said you was done, where did you channel that energy to?
I don't know if I did. I think I just created momentum in the other direction of like stagnancy. My mom was amazed when I told her recently how much I skipped, because I would get up every morning and leave like I was going for school. And then as soon as she'd leave, I'd come back and either go back to sleep or invite a few friends over or something like that. So that energy went into kind of skirting the system. The energy went into expending as little energy as possible to kind of get by, to kind of, you kind of become cool in some regards when everybody else who skipped school can come over to your house and do it.
Right. Yeah, you the man right there.
Ain't no doubt. Ain't no doubt, especially in high school, so.
Exactly. So explain to us when you start flirting with prison and jail.
It didn't take long. I was on juvenile probation. I often tell people that I have been on some form of supervision or incarceration since 1985, which is hard for a lot of people to even fathom. So I've been enmeshed in the system for a long time. My first time of actually doing any time was at 17. And in Michigan at 17, you were an adult in the adult system you were in the adult system when I was growing up. And I went to county jail. I actually caught an attempted escape while I was in there. So I spent a year in the county jail. I got out. I was supposed to do probation. I think I went and reported once. They chased me, caught me. I did 6 more months, discharged. Caught another case shortly after that, went to prison for my A prefix. Did a little over 2 there. Didn't want to go back. Don't get me wrong. I didn't want to go back, but I didn't develop the kind of resiliency that I needed to be able to, truly live life on life's terms. So I got out, tried, like I said, wasn't strong enough to do it, and eventually kind of felt like I got, financially and emotionally backed into a corner, and took off again, and, went on a spree that included, robbing a bank that ended me up in prison for 27 years.
And so when you say you didn't have that resiliency,
yeah,
can you explain that a little bit more? And was that resiliency was what you needed when you started facing them hard times, and then, like you said, the financial bind?
Sure, I have. When I describe my own resiliency, it's a combination of factors. One, I just didn't have it. I just didn't have the fortitude to know. I didn't have the tools. I work as a peer recovery coach, and one of the things that they talk about is when you have a substance use disorder, your rate of maturation stops. Now, that doesn't mean that because I started using at 8, I'm forever an 8-year-old. Some people will, push back against that for that very reason. What it means is at 8, my primary method of dealing with sadness, with joy, with things like that was alcohol. And so when that is your primary thing, you don't develop other tools like most people would over the course of their maturation. So when I say I didn't have the resiliency, I didn't have enough tools to deal with it. Yeah, I would try and resist, and it was really strong. It was the difference between wrestling and judo. I didn't know how to use the energy of life in my advantage. I was constantly wrestling with it, trying to make it go, where I wanted it to go. And then eventually you fatigue, and that's what I did is that I fatigued. I was fighting. I was having a hard time finding a job. When I finally did find a job, it sucked and I wasn't very good at it. So I wasn't really earning any money. And I wasn't even really getting by, and I certainly wasn't even starting to get ahead. And so I didn't have the ability to either look for another job or whatever the case may be that I've learned to be able to do now. So when I say resiliency, it's both inner and it's just your toolkit. My toolkit was pretty bare. It's kind of like being in the joint. I was fixing everything with a pair of fingernail clippers.
Oh no! Oh yeah, you ain't gonna be able to make it like that.
No.
Not out here.
No.
And so you say you went on and you got on to other robbing sprees. You end up the bank robbery get you to 27 years.
Yeah.
I went to trial. When I went to trial one time, and I lost, and they gave me a extra 12-year sentence, and it turned my time into 19 years. And that's when I went to the Missouri Department of Corrections and I knew that feeling of going in there with 19 years. Explain the feeling that you had when you knew you was going into prison, back to prison, but this time you was going for 27 years. Explain that.
It didn't fully hit me. Because I remember sitting in the county jail and everybody was like, well, what do you think? Because I took mine to trial too, because I had the habitual, and they weren't plea bargaining. They'll usually give you a plea bargain, and they were done with me. They weren't plea bargaining. They were like, we're not even taking the habitual off. Plead to it and throw yourself on the mercy of the court. Mercy and court did not go together in my vocabulary. So I took it to trial, even though I'm on camera. So I remember telling people, they said, what do you think you're going to get? And I remember saying, they're probably going to give me 30 years. But none of that sunk in. None of the 30, mind you, I'm 22 years old sitting in the county. I just turned 23 when they sentenced me. So those years don't even mean anything to me. They're just a concept. I get to quarantine. And quarantine, for those who don't know, is where they get you prepared for where you're going to do your time. They figure out, what programs you need, what level you need to be in, calculate the amount of time. Because at that time, we still had disciplinary credits. So that you get 5 different outdates. And since I was the habitual, it was my calendar outdate that meant the most. So my calendar outdate was 2022. And this is 1993. I just turned 23 years old. I cannot imagine 22 years into the next century. Those who are old enough to remember it, remember Buck Rogers and Space Odyssey and stuff like that take place in the year 2022. So seeing that on a piece of paper stuck with me. So all of a sudden, then I started asking myself questions like, am I going to worry about impressing everybody in here, or am I going to worry about impressing people that matter the most? What am I going to do with this? What does this mean? Am I going to have to kill somebody in here? This is what I'm thinking. Am I ever really going to get out?
And those that's tuning in, like them are real questions when you go into prison with that amount of time. With in Missouri, they do the high alphas. We call it high alphas. Like the ranking, you do high alphas, low alphas. So especially going to high alpha, and you in prison where everybody in there has the same amount of time or even more. And like you said, one of the questions is, am I going to have to kill somebody, or am I even going to make it out of this? And that's the reality of what it is.
Absolutely. And especially since this is the person who I just talked about doing all these missions and being this person who would always, try to impress people with the ridiculous and the absurd. This is the first time that I started questioning that, because at first I remember thinking to myself, I wrote a poem called I'm Going to 4 Block. Now, 4 Block is notorious. 2 weeks before I show up in 4 block, they stabbed 7 officers. 7 officers.
Man, 7, right.
The
Officers.
the second day I'm in there, I hear boom, 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 and I look down because I figure that something's going on at the officer station. The officers are down there fighting, beating the crap out of each other.
Oh no.
So,
oh man.
yeah. So I'm like, oh man, what did I get myself into? You know? But it was amazing that I started asking those questions. I call it a divine moment, you know, because it was one of those things where, you know, divinity reached into quarantine and laid its hands on me. And I started to realize for the first time in my life, I have some choices to make. And I laughed out loud in my cell because I remember thinking, man, why couldn't I realize I had choices to make 5 months ago?
Right.
You know?
Right.
Right, because I didn't believe I had choices. I believed all these things were already set out for me. And so even though I straddled the fence for a long time after that, and I did some stuff that you do when you're in prison, and you do some things that could get somebody killed and things of that nature, I was also on my path to starting to figure some stuff out and starting to realize I got to figure out who I want to be as a person, and that's where I need to start putting my energy.
And how long did it take? So, like you said, when you got in there, you started questioning yourself, but you know, you go in there, you got that much time, you got to jail. At the same time,
Yeah.
you got to jail. You know,
Yeah.
there's no way you're not going to jail.
Right.
So, how long of jailing did you do before you realized and you really sit back and said, okay? Because you know, a lot of people wait till 1 or 2 years for it's time to come home, start working on themselves.
Right.
At what point in time, while you was incarcerated, did you decide, okay, I'm really starting investing and working in me?
I started weaning myself off of jail, and within a few years, I stopped drinking in there after 4.
Okay.
And when I say drinking, I mean I drank every other day in there. It was 1 day drunk, 1 day sober. That's you know, that's what I did. Using other drugs and stuff like that. Slowly, I stopped doing, you know, all of those things. I started getting involved. Long story short, in that part of it, when I stopped just jailing was probably about 10 years into my bit. But what started me on that path to putting my feet firmly on the other side and starting to develop habits that I knew would transfer out here was I started faking it almost. I started going to some classes. I started going to some groups and stuff like that. Like, I'll just try this on. I ain't got nothing better to do. I'm in a high level anyway, so I can't get out of my cell. So let me go ahead and go to these NAACP meetings, and let me go ahead and go to these groups, these self-help groups that are run by other prisoners and stuff like that. And it was just an opportunity to get out of my cell. And as I started doing that, they say work on your goals because they'll begin to work on you. And I didn't even realize it, that I started to start working on this stuff, and it started working on me. And so all of a sudden I was put into positions of responsibility. And like, I was the PR director for the Saginaw NAACP. And we did a big thing when we brought the chapter back to Saginaw, which was a really big deal. And I started to realize I have something to offer. And it was probably my first time in my life that I started to realize I had something to offer and that people would listen to what I had to say.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to, when you said that you finally, the first time in your life, felt like you had something to offer, what was that feeling like?
Both. It was a double-edged sword. It scared the crap out of me because I was like, I'm going to let everybody down. Now everybody's looking towards me, and I've always let everybody down. But it was also something that was different about it. It was, this is genuine. I'm tapping into something real this time. I wasn't sure if I was still fooling myself, but I had enough time under my belt doing that I started to realize if I am, I've never been one to do the long con, so I'm doing pretty good in this situation if I am. And I also believed it would work its way out in the wash. I'd see it eventually. And it just didn't show. It didn't show. I started realizing who I was. And once I realized who I was, I started to actually be able to see who I could be.
That's bars right there. You might have to repeat that one. You might have to repeat that one so somebody can catch that one.
Right.
Man.
Well, yeah, that idea. I mean, I think that's real. I think it's just like the idea, if you can't see it, you can't be it. When you see somebody else that you can emulate, I think the same thing applies with us. If you can't see it in you, you can't be it. So you really have to be able to, tap into that. And that genuinely, once I figured out who I was, I had a vision of who I could actually be, which is a beneficial presence. It's not just some version of me in a specific suit, though you did see the picture I did. I look sharp in that suit too, didn't I?
You looking real spooky in there, man. Ain't nothing wrong with
I call it my camouflage, man. The suit gets me into rooms that nobody else would let me into, and then they don't know, and then I tell them my story.
Exactly.
But I've told a bunch of my friends that are in there too, because everybody walks out the door and talk about, I ain't never coming back here. And you see them come back time and time again, especially when you've done a lot of time. And some of us came back. We were the ones other people saw come back. But I told all my people, and I genuinely mean this and will do it. I said, I'm coming back. I said, and I'm coming back in a suit and tie. So
that's basically how you do it.
Yeah.
And so, how did you end up taking college courses inside?
I've been blessed that I've got some strong people in my corner that have helped me, and also that I'd started to learn enough about myself that I was willing to contribute and invest in myself too. So while they had the Pell Grants gone and we weren't getting any classes, while we were in there, family, friends, and the good jobs that I had in the penitentiary, and again, for those who don't know, I had a good job that paid $1.70 a day. I contributed to my college education, and so I started earning credits as we could afford to take the classes. I took them correspondence, so it was all through the mail. I switched schools a couple times because I started out where I got in where I could fit in. I started to do some research, found some places that were a little bit more affordable, found places that I could get the books at a better deal and stuff like that. Because a lot of those books are like $2.50 a piece.
Right.
Yeah. So I did all that. And then towards the very tail end, before I got out, they came back with a second chance Pell Grant. And I took some more, but by then I'd already earned my associate's degree in psychology. So yeah, it was just my fiance, her family, my income, between us, we made it happen, and we got all the way through the 60 plus credits. So
congratulations, man. That's what's happening.
Thank you.
So you in prison, you made this change, you offering help, it feels good, it's getting close to coming home. What is that feeling like?
Well, there was a hitch in mine because I had the habitual, so
Yeah.
I was actually eligible to come home at 25. And then you have to go back through the judge or the successor judge to basically, it's basically, so if somebody's really screwing up, the judge can say, no, we're not, you didn't learn anything. We're not going to honor these disciplinary credits. But what happens when that much time passes and eras in criminal justice pass, the judges don't understand the reasoning behind the sentence at the time. So my successor judge didn't understand that she wasn't changing my sentence by honoring my disciplinary credits. So I thought it was a done deal. I was an exemplary inmate for the last 15 years. I taught so many classes and facilitated so many groups that if I were to start doing them again, one every day, it would take me 9.5 years before I hit the same number again. Because I was doing, that was how I was doing the second half of my bit. And I was staying ticket free and, all of those things. And she said, I don't care. I'm not going to change the judge's sentence. Go back in there and do 4.5 more years. So I did the countdown once. And this is the most powerful and impactful part about it. And one of the reasons why I knew when I got out this time that I wasn't faking myself and that this was the real deal. Because remember, I hadn't been in that courtroom in 25 years. I'd been in that courtroom many a times. And when I walked in, I always saw two groups of people that I hurt. My family sitting on the side, where the defense, sits, and the victims of the crime sitting on the other side behind where the prosecution sits. And so I walked into that courtroom this time, and there's nobody on the prosecution side because this isn't a trial. And it's the first time I've come into the courtroom knowing I haven't hurt somebody. And so I see like 13 or 14 of my family and friends sitting there all huddled up, waiting for this hearing to be done so that I can be coming home in a few months. And I get read the Riot Act and told I'm everything but a child of God, basically, and that you could go back in there for 4.5 years. And now I'm watching, my brother almost got a contempt case because he walked out cussing, about the whole system. My fiance is crying. My grandma's crying. My grandma's almost got a contempt case too. But everybody's just, shocked and hurt on a level nobody saw it coming. So I dealt with that, and I went back, had the long ride back to the facility, and I'm weighing these things. What are you going to do? And something is you're going to keep doing what you've been doing. I had a class to facilitate that night, so I went back in and I facilitated a class. And at first, I was going to, just lay down and take it because I was like, well, this is my bed. I made it. I'll lie in it. And I had a couple guys in the law library that I worked with that said, no, man, you didn't earn this part of it. You need to fight this. And after they told me that, it made me think, yeah, I'm not going to victimize my family again. I'm not going to victimize my family again by having them do another 4.5 years with me. So I appealed it. Went up and down the system in the state of Michigan, and I won. I actually got a published opinion, which how rare that is. They usually do it under the cloak of darkness so that they can just get rid of you, and they publish the opinion.
Exactly.
So then I did another countdown, but everything happened pretty quick, and I came home pretty quick. Matter of fact, I beat COVID out the door by 2 months.
Ooh. What was that like getting out into a pandemic on the verge?
Well, first, let me say this, that I get a little bit motion sickness. So the first day is also interesting in and of itself. We stop in town. I get some Burger King sandwich, the sandwiches for breakfast, and I eat them. And we're driving home, and I haven't been in a car very much. So I'm getting all sick in the stomach, getting the bubble guts on the way home. As soon as we hit Lansing, I tell my fiance, you got to pull over. She's like, what? And I'm like, no, you got to pull over now. And she pulled over somewhere, and my sandwich ended up in the snow behind somebody's car. And right. But I was a little bit off all day, but I was still free. I was so happy, even though I probably looked terrible. I loved it. The idea of just beating the pandemic out has been a double-edged sword. I still got friends in there. I still got people I genuinely love and care about in there, and some of them have passed away in there. I know I got a list of the guys in the Michigan Department of Corrections who passed away, and I got that about 6 or 8 months ago. And at that point in time, I knew a dozen of them. And I would have called 6 or 8 of them friends. So that's been difficult. I got friends that I still talk to in there that have caught it, that have survived it, but they're also dealing with, the extreme controlled movement and the fear of this. It's another stress I'm in prison. Out here, I just got work when the pandemic hit. I was canvassing for things they were trying to put on the books for the next election. I think I was canvassing for the Elliott Larson's Civil Rights Act here in Michigan. And I just got promoted to field supervisor. I mean, literally, I had this job for a week, but I impressed them. And they were like, yeah, you can take care of this, blah, blah, blah. And so I got a $2 raise. I'm all excited and happy. And Thursday, I'm canvassing outside the Secretary of State, and they close it down because of the pandemic. So, yeah. So the day got cut short that way. We went somewhere else for a couple hours, but it didn't work very well. The next day, we went out to MSU's campus. Halfway through the day, they closed it down. And so that was on a Friday. So everything was a little bit weird. And then Sunday, they called and they'd closed the company down. They said, we're not, there's no canvassing going on. The governor's about to do this. And so there was no more job. So, but again, I'm a firm believer in, obstacles as opportunities. And so this was an obstacle, but the whole world, look what we're doing right now, man. You're down there in Missouri, up here in Michigan.
Exactly.
This created an opportunity. So I actually found a job doing peer recovery coaching that was almost entirely remote. So I was able to get a job that was an hour and a half away from me. And I was able to do it from home and look for other work. Which I found a full-time position too as the Jackson Area Recovery Community Coordinator for Home and New Vision, which is like middle management. It's not a bad deal. So it's been very difficult in one regard, but anytime you've done time in prison, everybody talking about everybody being locked up out here and calling this quarantine, and this ain't nothing.
You ain't seen nothing. You ain't seen a lockdown yet. You ain't seen nothing.
I saw a guy making a video that said this ain't prison, and he was doing it with like the cards. This ain't prison because you ain't got to bring a shank to the shower. This ain't prison because you ain't keeping your milk cold in the toilet. Things like that. It's like all the reasons why this ain't prison.
All the reasons why this ain't prison. Like you said, we go through all the cards.
Right.
Man. So when you got out, and speaking of work, did you get out looking for any jobs, or did you look for jobs that play towards your strengths?
No, when I first got out, I was looking for anything.
Okay.
And I mean, literally, I was getting shot down by gas stations and stuff because they didn't trust me to hold $50. I told one manager, kind of jokingly, because I also say I was 30 for 30 in interviews because everybody wanted to hire me. But some policy or something was in place where they just couldn't do it, or they'd wait a certain amount of time. But I told one person at one gas station, I said, that logic is messed up. I said, I'm not here I didn't go to prison for stealing something out of the cash register. I went to prison for sticking someplace up, and so you're probably better having me behind the counter.
Right.
Right. But they just
might give me a job just in case I get on bad luck.
Right. I look fondly upon you guys. Right.
Right.
But there was a lot of places like that, but it was good because you know how it is, man. When you get out and when you get into survival mode, if I would have got any of those jobs and kept any of those jobs, there's a loyalty factor. We've probably both been loyal to things we never had any business being loyal to. So I would have got some job. I would have ended up as some assistant manager or manager at a Shell gas station or something, because I would have felt some kind of loyalty to them for helping me. And I never would have been able to do the work that I'm doing now and help the people that I did. So those doors were closed to me on purpose. Those obstacles created the opportunities that I needed to realize my true potential, that dirty word that I grew up with.
That's what you didn't like. That's what you didn't like for people to say.
No.
So you're out on parole, coming out of prison. everybody, we all got as a ex criminal coming out of prison. Nobody wants to be on parole or probation. What do I need a babysitter for? What was your feelings on being on parole? Because I heard you say on the interview that you was talking about how parole is the least restrictive form of incarceration.
Right. Most people don't even realize that because that's exactly what it is. You're still subject to the rules of prison as opposed to the laws out here. You might be subject to both, but the fact is you could go back for anything. So it's a little bit it's frightening in that regard because I'm living my best life. And I can't imagine if that got snatched from me, but I know I'm not doing anything to contribute to it getting snatched from me for the first time in my life. So it is, it's seamless in one regard right now because of the fact that, like I said, I'm not worried about it. You want me to pee in a cup? I'll pee in a cup every day. I'll do it 3 times a day, if you want to, whatever the case may be, whatever you need of me. But I'm also blessed in that too, that my PO is not a prick about any of this stuff. He's not pushing me too hard. Matter of fact, there's been times that they haven't had a lot of resources available to them. So in my job, I've made sure that they understand the recovery resources that are available in the area so that they can, point people in the right direction. So it's not even a matter of just how I did feel. It's how I do feel because I don't get off it till January. I'm still on parole,
Right.
So there's a little bit of that. I describe certain things as gravity. There's a gravity to the fact that you're on, parole because what could happen, whether or not the odds are in favor of it or not. And so when those things get lifted, you feel lighter. And my fiance and I are talking about, when I get off parole, taking a trip, out of state. And I'm talking about within a matter of days after getting off it. And she's like, well, why so? At first she's like, well, why so quick? And because I can.
Because exactly. That's exactly what I did when I got off. Because I got off beginning of this year, January the 2nd. This is the first time in my life ever since the year 2000 that I haven't been in state prison or federal prison or either on state supervision or federal supervision, parole or federal. And that was like 21 years. And once it was over with, I wasn't on up. That's the first thing I did.
Yep.
Just
Congratulations on that.
I didn't have to ask nobody.
No.
I could go.
No doubt. I did the same thing when I got my driver's license. She asked me that, and it was like winter here in Michigan. And I'm driving towards Lake Michigan, and there's snow coming in and stuff. And she's like, why do you have to do this now? Because I can. I got my driver's license, and I went. And what I went and did, though, was also a testament to who I'd become, because one of the places that I was going to was a place called Humanity for Prisoners, and Doug Chapke started it. And Doug Chapke's is a rock star in so many ways, and so is his son, Matt, who's taken it over, because they do the simple stuff for people. You can't, Freedom of Information Act, you can't get any of that stuff anymore by being a prisoner. So they do the little stuff like that. They get the things that we couldn't get. They ask the questions that you couldn't ask on your own, the little stuff that shows that somebody cares about you. So what I wanted to do when I got my driver's license was make sure that I did the same thing for him and showed him that I cared. And so I'd only been out for less than 3 weeks. And I drove basically into a snowstorm to shoot a promo video, with him, and to let him know how much, he makes a difference in people's lives,
Right.
So.
So somebody's getting, I always ask these 2 questions on my podcast. The first one is, somebody's getting out of prison tomorrow and they see this video.
Mm.
What would one message you would leave for them?
Be prepared to hear no. It sucks. I get it. You've heard no for your entire bit, that people are telling you no on a regular basis, but you survived that too. And somehow you managed to walk out the doors on parole. I got no from countless interviews, but it only takes one yes. I got in the right room in the right situation with both of my current bosses. I worked at 2 jobs. One of them owned the company, Parkside Family Counseling, and she was willing to take a chance on me. In fact, she wrote me around Christmas and told me she didn't even realize how much of a chance she was taking on me. And Glynis Anderson for Home of New Vision, when I interviewed with her, stopped me at one point in my interview and said, "Do you realize you're a miracle?" And that's powerful. That still sticks with me. So if you come out to this, whether it be a pandemic or whether the world's wide open, you're gonna get a lot of no's. But all it takes is one yes. And the only way to get to some of those yes is to go through all those no's. The worst no in the world is when you tell yourself no. Make somebody else tell you no. Make that person that you want the job from tell you no. When I interviewed for the second position, this Jackson Area Recovery Community position, everybody said, "You're crazy. There ain't no way you're going to get that. That's above your pay grade. Let them tell me no."
Right.
And they didn't tell me no.
That's what's and for real, like you said, you're gonna hear a lot of no's.
Yeah.
You gotta prepare yourself for it, because that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
It is. You're not the first, and you're not going to be the last.
No.
You're going to hear the no's. You got to just keep going through it, like you said. Walk right through it, like you didn't even hear it. Okay, no, on to the next.
Right. I mean, think about that for a minute. I mean, how many times did we hear no growing up, and we still did the stuff that got us in trouble? How many times did we hear no that ended us up in prison or ended us up using substance? We can plow through no when we want to, but we also, don't get me wrong. There's legitimate reason to be upset about this. I mean, one of the things we're working with Nation Outside is this idea of, ban the box and fair housing and things like that. Person needs to get a fair shake in this stuff. I get that. It's not going to be fair, but there's appropriate. You can be angry about something that's appropriate. And I use this as an example, and it might be a little bit crass in some ways, but if somebody kicks you in the balls, the appropriate response is to get on the fetal position on the ground and grab your stuff.
Right.
If I come back tomorrow and you're still in the fetal position holding your junk, that's no longer appropriate. And that's what we do sometimes with no, is it's appropriate to get angry. It's appropriate to get upset about that stuff, but not to lay on the ground in the fetal position. Once that stuff has subsided, get up, dust up, go on to the next one, because we have the ability to kind of change this. And one of the things that we have to do is just show up. I don't know, and I don't want to go too far into this, but if anybody knows the story of Gandhi and them showing up at the piers saying, "This is our salt," what they did is they basically had these soldiers knocking them down with the butts of their rifles until the point where they were so disgusted with their own behavior that they couldn't do it anymore. Sometimes we got to show up, and we ain't even got to catch a butt from a rifle to the face. We just got to take a no in an interview.
Some game right there. So one word to describe this journey, your journey, what would it be and why?
Purposeful. Everything that I've done, people will ask me many a times, do you have regrets? Because it would be natural to, think about that, and especially doing 27 years and doing that extra 2 on the end of it. And my answer to that is I have but one regret. And the regret is that people got hurt. Everything that has happened to me has served me. I'm 51 years old. I'm living my best life. I'm about to marry my best friend and the most amazing person that I've ever known. And I get to do something that many people only wish they could do, and that's truly impact people's lives. So if paying the dues that I paid to get here are worth it, because you also know as well as I do, prison ain't a picnic. They certainly don't do you any favors when you're there, because the programs are minimal and they usually come at the end of it. It's warehousing to a certain point. But the fact is, you also find ways to live in there. And you got people that you care about. You got your own families in there. I got people in there that I'll never forget, that I'll never leave behind, that I carry with me everywhere that I go, that I had good times with, that I had things that we had to grieve. So even though that wasn't the way I would have chosen to spend 27 years, it made me into who I am today. It helped to break down this raw ore that I was, that potential that I hated so much in the past, and kind of refine me in a way that now other people are starting to recognize, that's got a little value to it.
Purposeful. Well, we here, myself and everybody that's tuning in and in the group, man, we appreciate you sharing your story with us on the reentry journey. Feel free to join our group on Facebook. If you got any videos or anything upcoming in your area, just post it in the group, and then, so let everybody know, maybe connect with somebody in your area. Once again, thank you for coming on to the reentry journey, sharing your story. We appreciate your growth and all the work that you do. Your story impacts a lot of people. Any final words? Let the people know how they can get in contact with you.
I give you my email because that's the easiest way to get a hold of me, and it's theirlifematters500@gmail.com. And I did that because I don't care who you're talking about. Their life matters, and that's important. I think that, unfortunately, the criminal justice system has become the last bastion for some latent racism and things of that nature. And some people would like to use other words, and they can't use them, so they get to call people convict and offender and everything else. And so I'm living my life on a daily basis with that theory and philosophy in mind. Whoever I'm dealing with, their life matters, and I want to be a beneficial presence. I want to make sure that I show up, and that when I leave, there's been a benefit for it. So theirlifematters500@gmail.com. Just keep your eyes open for me. I know there's another Adam Grant out there who's a really famous psychologist, another bald-headed white guy, which doesn't help matters at all.
Right.
But if you keep looking, you'll find me. I think I'm a little bit more handsome than he is, but that's beside the point. And I'm doing the criminal justice thing. So you're going to find me, working with Nation Outside. You're going to find me working with Safe and Just Michigan here. You're going to find me working with Power and Passion. Like I said, Humanity for Prisoners, all these things, I genuinely believe in them because I genuinely believe in myself, and I genuinely believe in you, and I genuinely believe in the people that are still going to follow us out of those doors. And I think that's huge because most of them don't think anybody believes in them.
Right. And it is huge. Once again, man, we thank you for everything that you do. We really do. If you ever want to reach out and come back on, just don't be afraid to reach out. Anything we can collab on or come up with, don't be afraid to reach out. I'm always open to connecting and collabing with other people in different states. So, like I said, don't be afraid to reach out. And thanks again for coming on to the reentry journey. We appreciate you.
Sounds good to me. I appreciate you too.
All right, man. You have a great night.
You too.